Hey everyone, Chris the old ass retro gamer here, and welcome to the next installment of my Star Wars series, where I talk about some of my favorite and least favorite games based on the franchise. Just like when The Force Awakens came out back in 2015, I released the Star Wars games The Bad and Star Wars games The Rad videos to coincide with that film. So now that Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is about to be released, which is the final episode in the Skywalker saga, I figured it'd be a good idea to bring this whole thing full circle, just like the film series, by bringing back my favorite and least favorite Star Wars games videos. Like I mentioned before, one of my goals is to get all of the games based on Star Wars that are available for the home consoles, and I'm pretty close. I've still got a few more left to go, a couple of really expensive ones, like the ones for the classic consoles, like the Atari 2600. Even though I made the original Bad and Good Star Wars games videos back in 2015, doesn't mean I've stopped collecting them at all. I'm still going strong. I'm picking them up whenever I find them, and naturally, I'm gonna find good and bad ones. So last week I talked about the bad, today we're talking about the rad. So here are 6 more of my favorite Star Wars video games. Star Wars Lethal Alliance on the PSP, and I do believe this is also available on the Nintendo DS. This is a 3D action third-person platformer that is very reminiscent of a Tomb Raider game. You play as a character named Rhianna Saren, who is a Twi'lek bounty hunter mercenary character, and she has like a droid companion that floats around with her, and you do all sorts of Tomb Raider-esque platforming. Also, there's a lot of combat, hand-to-hand, and blaster-based. There's some cool martial arts moves, there's some awesome power-ups that you can find, and gadgets that are really neat, like the holographic disguises. And the combat is very fun and fluid, and on the PSP it works surprisingly well. I mean, this could actually have been ported to one of the actual home consoles and would have been just as fun. Rihanna's a pretty cool character, and using her little droid buddy as well is pretty cool, and it's just a really cool, like, side story in the Star Wars universe that I think is fascinating and fantastic. I love the games like this that introduce new characters and situations that doesn't have really anything to do with Jedis or anything like that. It's a really neat game that takes place in a corner of the Star Wars universe that you don't normally see, that also kind of ties into the movies in a way because you're after the Death Star plans. Kind of prequel-esque storyline, but I really enjoyed this one and I played the hell out of it when I first picked it up.
You must do what you feel is right, of course.
Star Wars Episode 1 Racer on the Dreamcast. This is also available on the Nintendo 64 and was also a really awesome arcade game that you sat in a pod racer with the pod racer controls working the game, which was rad. Even though they are named the same, this and the Nintendo 64 game are a little bit different. It is a racing game, obviously, that takes place during Episode 1, all about the pod racing scene, and then some, not just on Tatooine, but multiple planets with multiple characters, multiple pod racers, and where in the Nintendo 64 version, which is not bad, kind of faltered was in the speed. This one is just like, wow. It claims to be running like at 600 miles an hour. It really does project a sense of speed, and that's what makes it great. And the tracks are designed very, very well. It's challenging. The other opponents, the AI-controlled ones, are out to get you, like they are in the film, and they really give you a run for your money. The graphics are great for an earlier Dreamcast game, and it really does give you the feeling of that scene from the film. It made for a fantastic game that I keep going back to over and over again. This is such a great game. It actually got a sequel called Star Wars Episode 1 Racer Revenge. Yeah, that sequel technically is better because it was out on the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, but you know what? This one is the one I keep going back to. So, that says something. So like I said, if I had a choice between the Dreamcast and the Nintendo 64 version, I'm going with the Dreamcast every single time.
Hey, it's me.
Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith on the Game Boy Advance. Now, last time, I talked about the game based on Episode 2 for the Game Boy Advance being horribly bad. Well, this one was developed by a completely different company, and you know what? They got this one right. This one is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, just like Final Fight, but with lightsabers. And yes, the graphics are very cartoony and were a big step up from what was in the game based on Attack of the Clones. And it controls extremely well, follows the plot of the movie decently. Obviously, there's going to be some side steps in order to pad the game out a little bit longer. The big thing about this one is that it's actually fun to play. You can play as either Anakin or Obi-Wan. Each one plays slightly differently. They each have different combos, and you're going to come across all the characters from the film, like General Grievous and Count Dooku. And obviously, it's going to come down to a fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin. It also has two-player co-op, which is fantastic. fantastic if you have a link cable, where you can play as Obi-Wan and Anakin together and whoop ass all over the place. It looks great, it plays great, it feels like Episode 3. I'm not a big fan of the film itself, but the game is pretty awesome.
This is where the fun begins.
Star Wars Episode 1, Battle for Naboo on the N64. This was developed by Factor 5, the people who made Rogue Squadron for the N64. But the thing about this is, it's not all about outer space dogfighting. Most of it takes place at ground level, and you're in speeders and stuff like that. There's even underwater levels, which is completely new for a Star Wars game, I gotta say. Yes, there's some outer space dogfight action when you're in Naboo Starfighter that takes place later on in the game, but for the most part, you're at ground level, and it is actually really fun and a nice change of pace from what Rogue Squadron was. They could have easily just done another Rogue Squadron style game and just slapped all the Naboo stuff over it to make it seem different. No, it's a completely new scenario, and it's a lot of fun, and it controls great, it looks great. This actually uses the expansion pack to enhance the graphics a little bit, and just like Factor 5 normally does, they do everything they can to make you feel like you're in a Star Wars film. This one just came and took me by surprise when it first came out. I really didn't have any interest in buying it because I hate Episode 1. But I rented it at a Blockbuster, and I was like, this is actually pretty awesome. Yeah, it's based on a movie that I can't stand, but the game is actually pretty amazing. And if there's one thing I will say about the N64, pretty much all the Star Wars games that came out for it are great.
I had nothing to do with it.
Star Wars Dark Forces on the PS1. This was a port of a PC game, which is basically Star Wars Doom. It's a first-person shooter, one of the earliest ones out there, that is very pixelated, just like Doom. Everything is blocky and all that, but that's just the way they looked back in the day. They hadn't gone full 3D yet, so can't blame them. This is one of my favorite old-school first-person shooters, and not just because it's based on Star Wars, but because it's actually a really well-designed game. Yeah, it's a clone of Doom. There's hidden areas and weaponry and all that kind of stuff, all these upgrades you can get, and lots of enemies to take out, some new, some old, some recognizable, some not. It's all about the level design, and they are designed amazingly. And yeah, it's a first-person shooter, but you know, everything is instantly recognizable as being from a Star Wars film. The sounds are all there, the music is there, the cutscenes are pretty awesome and tell a really cool original story. And the one thing that I love about this game is that it introduced one of my favorite extended universe characters of all time in Kyle Katarn, who is in my favorite Star Wars game of all time, Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast. She starts off as just your average smuggler in here that uses blasters to becoming a full-on Jedi Knight. His story arc over these games is pretty amazing, and this is part one of that series, so if you like Kyle Katarn as much as I do, you definitely need to own this. I still go back and play this one all the time, for good reason. It's awesome.
I know.
And the last game I want to talk about is also the newest Star Wars game to have been released, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. I honestly had no intention of buying it when it first came out. I was gonna wait till it got discounted a couple of times before I picked it up. The day that it was released, I was watching Joel from Media Glitch streaming this, and I had so much fun watching him, I said, you know what? Why not? I'm just gonna go pick it up myself, and I did. And I had a blast playing this game. It is absolutely fantastic. It tells an original story with original characters, takes place between episodes 3 and 4, where after the Jedi Purge, a Padawan who lost his master and has kind of given up on the ways of the Jedi has to become a Jedi once again in order to fight the Empire. The main character is played by Cameron Monaghan, who you might recognize from playing the Joker on Gotham as well as being on Shameless. And he plays a fantastic character in this as Cal Kestis. Kind of so much to the point where I kind of want to buy that action figure that they released of him. And all the characters that you interact with, the villains, the heroes, both interesting as all hell. The game's story is where it's at. It's all about people racked with guilt and how they've dealt with it over the years and how they plan to overcome it. So it's also kind of got a little bit of a mental health thing going on. But would that story work if the game wasn't that fun to play? It's a combination of a lot of really cool game types from the current generations. You've got a little bit of Dark Souls, a little bit of Uncharted, even a little bit of the old school Prince of Persia mixed into this, which is a smidgen of Metroidvania thrown in for good measure. You earn points to unlock skills in a skill tree, just like every other game out there with light RPG elements, and as the game progresses, you will unlock more and more Jedi powers, but the way that this game handles the unlocking of the new powers as the story progresses is through a series of flashbacks where Cal will remember something from his past when he was being trained as a Padawan, where he learned a specific task that he has forgotten over the years, and you learn it through the young version of Cal and then adopt it as the adult Cal. It's fantastic storytelling all the way through. It's fun yet challenging gameplay, not so hard that you want to give up. It's just hard enough to make you want to keep coming back and do better the next time. Awesome characters, phenomenally detailed graphics, a lot of surprises from a lot of different sources show up in here. Like there's a lot of stuff that was introduced in the Clone Wars TV show as well as Rebels. thrown into the mix here, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I love the lightsaber fighting in here. It feels very much like the fighting in the Prince of Persia games. For a game that I had basically zero interest in buying, I think this is probably one of the best Star Wars games that's come out in years. So if you haven't picked up a copy of Jedi Fallen Order yet, you really should, because if you're a Star Wars fan, this is everything you've been waiting for since The Force Unleashed came out.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
So there you have it, 6 more of my favorite Star Wars games. So what are some of your favorite games based on the franchise? Let me know in the comments below. So now that the Rise of Skywalker is here, I thought this was a great time to bring this video series out of mothballs. Maybe I'll do it again once another trilogy of Star Wars movies is coming out, because it's going to be a while before we get anything else Star Wars in the theaters. Everything Star Wars related is going to be on Disney Plus for at least the next couple of years. Like The Mandalorian. Gotta love that Baby Yoda. What kind of Star Wars games do you want to see come out in the future? I was really looking forward to that Star Wars 1313 before it got canceled, which is one of the reasons why I was not all that interested in this, because this just felt like we're just gonna pump a game out real fast because people will buy anything with a Star Wars name on it. So like I said, let me know what your favorite Star Wars games are below, and until next time, this is Chris, the old-ass retro gamer, saying, may the Force be with you.